Hey, if you're like me, a checklist helps. In fact, when I go off somewhere, I run my checklist of packing, and then I usually ask my wife what her list might be. So today, we're going to do a little checklist on winter prep. Talking about this checklist on winter prep, I can't do this. It's the middle of August. But if I have to wait till I need this coat, we're too late on a winter prep. So, much better. 3 things I believe the whole winter prep go around. Number 1, protect. Number 2, preserve. And number 3, produce. Almost sounds like a sermon, right? So, we're going to try to protect the things that get damaged. And most of the time, cold's impact is on liquids. And that's where a lot of damage comes from, whether it's diesel lines or whether it's water supply, water in your vehicles, things like that. So we're going to talk about that, protecting, and then preserving. Well, we're going to try to take care of as much heat as we've already got in the house. We're going to seal leaks. We're going to hit a few of those things. And then the last thing is produce. We're going to have to produce some heat during this cold weather. So now, also let me precede this by saying we have commercial poultry customers in Washington State, in Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, all over the north, all the way down to the panhandle of Florida. So not all of this is going to apply to everyone. And some of you are going to have to do things that the rest of us down here in the South just don't have to do. This is not an all-inclusive list, but hopefully it can help. So as far as protecting, when we talk about liquids, let's talk about everything from taking care of your vehicles, checking the antifreeze. If you got checking the antifreeze on your tractors, on your cars even, and even on your generators, you got an antifreeze. Putting anti-gel in your diesel lines, some fuel stabilizers, those kind of things that'll keep that from gelling up and being hard to get that to start. So there's some things on your liquids as far as your equipment is concerned. Protecting your engine, equipment, maintenance, those kind of things. The other thing is your outdoor water. One of the first things to do is cut off your water supply to your cool cells. You also want to drain those cool cells. So any type of water that's out there and exposed to the elements, I know this is common sense, but we're just going over a checklist, something to maybe remind you, things like that. Another good thing are these freeze-proof hydrants. That's a good way to kind of protect too. But as you look around, anything that's outdoor and exposed, protect. We got to protect so we don't damage anything with the cool weather coming. Protect. Now we want to talk about preserve. We want to take care of as much heat as we can. No sense in blowing money out the outside. Probably one of the first things you need to think about is get up in the attic. What does your attic insulation look like? Got a little video I think you'll find interesting right here. This is a girl who just sent me this. Rats had gotten in there and just eaten the heck, as you can see on this video. Crazy. And this all happened within about a 2-month span because they placed birds, and by the time they finished and they had catch, they would not put birds back in there because of all the damage that those rats had done. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming video on how to deal with rats and things like that. But check your attic insulation. That's where your heat's going to go first, is straight up. So if you can get your good insulation on top of there. Check your tunnel doors. Check your vents in there. They need to be as tight as they can, and maybe they'll take a little tweaking on those cables or whatever and getting it good and tight, good and shut to try to keep as much air from going out so that you can preserve that heat. Another thing, if you got them, check for your tunnel curtains. Make sure there's no tears so that it's got wind coming through onto the cold side. Check those things. Your tunnel doors, just totally inspect that to try to keep that house as tight as possible. So when you're paying for that money, for the gas we're about to talk about, you can preserve not only heat, but you're preserving money too. Okay, so we are protecting. We've talked about preserving. Now you got to produce some heat, because they need heat in there. You ain't got enough natural heat from that litter that's going to help it, no matter how tight the houses are. And more than likely, you've got some form of gas that's going to be producing the heat. So, a couple of things. Make sure your LP tank, now I know this is a small one, you're like, wow, that's a tiny farm, but the farm I'm on actually does not go off tanks. But they did have an LP tank close by, so just bear with me. Make sure your tanks are full. Also, you know, we want to produce heat, but we also want to do it as cheaply as possible. This is all about making money, right? So there may be some programs where you can pre-buy, and I know many of you know this, and it may be that by the time this video hits you, it's probably going to be a little late to pre-buy, but you know, kind of look ahead, maybe even for next year. Be thinking about if I could store a bunch, try to get the best price you can, obviously. And we've had some really bad gas prices lately. So make sure your LP tanks, make sure your gas is flowing, all that good stuff. Make sure your heaters are working. Do a little trial, a little test run. Last thing in the world you want to do is get chicks and all of a sudden now your heaters are out. And of course you got to deal with that all the time anyway. But check those things. Make sure your thermostats are working, your backup thermostats, your sensors, all these things that have to do with heat. Make sure these heaters and the fuel that gets those heaters going, make sure those are good to go. But those of you way up north, of course, I know you guys already think about these things, but your well houses, got to get some heat in those because, you know, it's going to be covered, obviously, but sometimes for extreme weather, you need to make sure you got a little heater, a little thermostat going on in there so protect that. And probably the last thing is an encouragement to set your controllers according to the company you grow for, according to their guidelines. They've done the research on this, and they probably do a little checking up on you too. So you want to make sure that all your controllers are set up like your company guidelines. So those are the 3 P's of winter prep. At least that's what I like to call it. So we're going to have protect. Take care of those fluids. You got shut down water outside in your cool cells, drain them, put anti-gel in your diesel lines, all those kind of things. We're going to preserve, get your house as tight as possible, no leaks, no air, all that good stuff. And then we got to produce some heat. So make sure your tanks are filled, make sure your gas is rolling, your heaters are working, all those things. Make sure your controllers are set up like your company wants you to do. So those are some things that we need to think about. Protect, preserve, and produce. Now, I want to encourage you that if you have some things that would be a really big help and maybe we didn't talk about them, how about in the comments below, plug in your little thing that you like to do or maybe a thing I missed. Plug it in on the comments or even reach out to me by email, alan@southlandorganics.com, and just say, hey, one thing you missed, you ought to think about, and I'll try to plug it in at another time. But hope these are a help. I'm sure you know every single one, but it's always good to kind of hear it again. So make this kind of like a checklist. If I can do anything else to help you, give me a holler at 608-3755 or alan@southlandorganics.com. And hey, let's get ready for winter. Here it comes.